Good afternoon and welcome back. I'm Marcus Peter. Pursuant from the conversation I had with Father Roger about Lebanon, I wanted to share a few things. Today, in 1453, Constantinople fell to Mehmed II. That was the leader of the Ottoman Empire at the time. It was a terrible day. It was the day the Eastern Roman Empire came to its final earthly end, and the Ottoman crescent rose over the city Constantinople that had once called itself the New Rome. It would be a matter of time before it became renamed as Istanbul. The fall of Constantinople, it deserves our attention here. It really deserves remembrance. It was a military catastrophe, but it also showed us historically the collision of two political theologies, not ideologies, but theologies. One is rooted in the Catholic conviction that all earthly authority exists under a rational divine law for the common good of all persons. The other one is the classical Islamic political theology, and that claim is that any revealed command in the Quran and the Hadith authorizes sacred conquest through the sword, especially when the unbelieving world resists submission to Islam, Muhammad, or Allah. And anyone wishing to discuss this honestly has to begin admitting that the Islamic sources do contain language that any sane civilization should be able to look at with some sobriety here, some seriousness. The Quran's verse about the sword, this is the verse: kill the polytheists wherever you find them. And that includes, unfortunately, within the Islamic category, Catholics are polytheists, Christians are polytheists, because we worship a God who is three in one. Now, it then adds that portion of the verse then adds the logic of capture and siege and ambush as the conditions for release by capture. This is in Quran 9 verse 5. It's difficult to square with the cheerful rebranding and brochure version of Islam that we're constantly put forth here in the West, the civilized West. Islam is not purely an interior spirituality. It acquired empires by its own Islamic doctrine. The Hadith literature intensifies that political theology. Sahih al-Bukhari records Muhammad as saying, "I have been ordered to fight against the people until they testify that none has the right to be worshipped but Allah and that Muhammad is Allah's messenger. After prayer and obligatory fealty is established across these areas that have become dominated, then life and property may be spared." Again, Sahih al-Bukhari 25, if you're looking. Now, you can argue about context, sure, but the enduring problem remains. Quranic and Hadithic Islam has a vocabulary that they consider sacred for military expansion. Christian political theology simply doesn't possess that concept in its constitutive sources. Ibn Khaldun stated the matter honestly. He wrote the Muqaddimah, and in it he wrote, for the Muslim community, holy war is a religious duty. That mission for them is universal, and others must be brought into Islam, according to Ibn Khaldun, either by persuasion or by force. And so that's saying it plainly. Modern public relations departments won't like that, but that's saying it plainly. And that's precisely why, if you remember Pope Benedict XVI's masterful Regensburg address, it caused global convulsions. All Benedict did was he cited a dialogue, an historical dialogue, between the Byzantine Emperor Manuel II Palaeologus and a learned Islamic Persian interlocutor. And the text was, "Show me just what Muhammad brought that was new." There's a specific nuance here, but I want to read the whole quote first. "Show me just what Muhammad brought that was new, and you will find things only evil and inhuman, such as his command to spread by the sword the faith he preached." That verse, "show what he brought that was new," can be understood in two ways, basically. What Muhammad brought that was new to human history and the history of religion, that's one. But secondarily, the transformation of Muhammad's theology when he went from Mecca to Medina and acquired not only the power of force in numbers, but also financial wealth and therefore military might. All of a sudden, the theology that Muhammad preached changed. But Benedict's deeper point here has to do with the relationship between faith and reason. It wasn't meant to stoke ire. If anything, the explosion against him proved his point. Because the Emperor Manuel II Palaeologus, his argument is philosophically right. Violence used to compel faith is already a sign of theological failure. God made man rational. Anything that is good exists from the mind of God. Reason is a good thing. The God who made man rational cannot be honored by a religious system that forces violence to anyone and anything that is an inconvenience to that religious system. And that's why the Catholic political tradition has an entirely different political grammar. You go all the way back to Deuteronomy 17. Israel's king is commanded to write for himself a copy of the law and to read it all the days of his life. Not just that he had to read it or listen to it, he had to write it out and read it all the days of his life, so that he may fear the Lord and refrain from exalting himself above his brethren. Biblical kingship, the model of biblical kingship and leadership, always begins under divine law. This is the original seed of constitutional sanity as we have it in the West. A ruler is accountable to the moral order that's greater than himself. The social order is governed under the moral order. The political community will thrive if he honors that, but it suffers when he exercises his power outside of divine justice. Augustine, if you read The City of God, he wrote, "Peace between man and God is the well-ordered obedience of faith to eternal law. Peace between man and man is well-ordered concord," which means our politics is not a matter of force. It's a matter of civil order. But that civil order is governed by rightly ordered loves that exist in a hierarchy. Incidentally, we had a vice president who quoted this. It's called the Ordo Amoris, the order of loves. St. Thomas Aquinas then gives the Catholic mind its most expansive formulation. He defines law as an ordinance of reason for the common good, made by him who has care of the community and promulgated. In other words, law must go from an intelligent mind to an intelligent mind. In other words, law serves the good of those who are constituents. This is a far cry from sacralized domination that we see in the Quran and the Hadith. Catholic political theology asks the question, is law whether the law is reasonable, whether the authority is serving persons, whether peace rests upon divine justice, whether the family is receiving the highest protection, and whether religion has its due honor in society. And then from there, questions like whether the poor are defended and whether the political order ultimately helps human beings thrive in accord with objective truth. Not as I want, not as mob rule, not as voted, objective truth. The Catechism states, the common good requires the respect for the persons, social well-being, development, and peace, that is, stability and security of a just order. What that shows is that Catholic social doctrine judges politics through the flourishing of the human person in light of that which is objectively true under God, regardless of who holds power at the time. Leo XIII taught in his document Immortale Dei that a rightly constituted state secures the rights of citizens through divine, natural, and human law. Pius XI, John Paul II, they developed the same concept. Politics must serve human dignity. Man is not raw material for the state, and he never will be. That distinction is crucial. Civilizations are built when leaders recognize the view of God, man, law, and final destiny in one coherent system. All things are accountable to God. There's a moral discipline of reason. Politics must fall under that reason. If not, it becomes an arena where power becomes sanctified even to the point of tyranny and terror. Lebanon, as it is existing right now, gives all of us in the West a stark lesson. It was long praised as a haven of coexistence between Christians and Sunnis and Shiites and Druze and other communities. Today, however, it's the arena where Hezbollah emerged in 1982 as a Shiite militant movement and a political force that's been shaped by Iranian revolutionary theology. Lebanon's tragedy proves to us that ordinary Muslims can live peacefully beside Christians for years until a disciplined militant network mobilizes the jihadist call. Now, That doesn't mean all of us have to be crudely suspicious of every single Muslim neighbor. We don't need to live in paranoia. It does require that we in the West, especially our leaders, stop pretending that theology has no political consequence, even after centuries of evidence have screamed the opposite. Serious immigration policies must consider assimilation, religious formation, civic loyalty, and the receiving of the nation's moral confidence. A civilization that doesn't believe in its own inheritance will invite others to rewrite it on their own terms, often forcefully. And that's my great concern about us in the United States. The West has an obligation to recover her history. Our ignorance has become the official catechism of our civilizational self-erasure. The West must recover the Judeo-Christian faith. A culture that's severed from biblical anthropology will forget why persons matter, why law must serve common justice, why liberty needs virtue, and why rulers have an obligation to submit themselves under the rational law of God. In the United States, that means returning seriously to Christ, to the founders and their deepest influences, the scriptures, classical and natural law, common law traditions. All of these things taught us that ordered liberty requires moral citizens and restrained government. I can go on, but here's the lesson. Constantinople fell in 1453. The lesson for us is alive today. If our civilization forgets the difference between a covenantal order and forced conquest under the guise of sacredness, well, then we will lose our civilization. But we have so much to fight for and regain and reclaim. And let's bring it all under the lordship of Jesus Christ. Stay tuned, I'm Marcus Peter.